The phone rang in the dead of night, its shrill tones slicing through the silence of the darkened house. I should have known it was coming, but I wasn't prepared for this, not like this. My hands shook as I reached for the receiver, the urgency in the air thick enough to make it feel like I was suffocating. It was my sister, Kara, but her voice, something in the way she said my name, sent a chill down my spine. "I need you to come now. Please, it's Mom." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mother, the woman who had held our family together for as long as I could remember, was gone. The news made no sense. She'd been perfectly healthy the day before. We were supposed to meet for brunch in the morning. And yet here I was, her body cold, the warmth of her presence snuffed out, and my sister sobbing on the other end of the line. But this wasn't the worst of it. No, the worst part was the news that followed. When I walked into the house, everything had shifted. A stranger, someone I had never met before, sat at the kitchen table. He was staring at the floor, his expression unreadable. "This is Vincent," Kara introduced him softly, but there was an odd weight to her words, a hesitation I couldn't place. "He's important." My heart pounded in my chest and my mind raced. Who was he? Why had I never heard of him before? And why, for the first time in my life, did I feel a deep, gnawing discomfort with the way Kara looked at him? There was something between them, something unspoken that felt like a dark cloud hovering above our grief. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grief does strange things to people, and in those moments of shock, we all act a little out of character. But then Vincent spoke, his voice low, smooth, and unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, as though the words had no weight, no depth. Then, in a whisper just for me, he added, "You were never supposed to know about me." I froze. What the hell did that mean? Before I could speak, before I could process the gravity of his words, my sister's gaze turned to me. Her eyes, usually filled with love and light, were now clouded with guilt, shame, and something else, something darker. "You need to understand something," she began, her voice trembling. "Everything you thought you knew about our family, about Mom, was a lie." The floor beneath me felt as though it was sinking, as though everything I had ever believed in was slipping through my fingers. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Kara hesitated for a long time, then, with shaking hands, she reached for a photo album on the coffee table. She flipped it open, her fingers brushing over the pages as if they were fragile. And there, in a picture I had never seen before, was Mom, not alone but with Vincent. They were standing together in a field, arms around each other, smiling like they had all the time in the world. But what sent the blood draining from my face wasn't just the image. It was the date on the back of the photo, written in my mother's careful script. "The secret we carry, no matter the cost." What secret? Why had she kept this from us? And then, like a sudden storm crashing into the calm, Kara whispered something that changed everything. "Vincent, he's not just a family friend. The word hung in the air like a heavy shadow, and I had to force myself to take a breath. "He's your father." The world tilted. My father, the man I had grown up believing was dead, the man I had always loved and mourned. It couldn't be true. It just couldn't. This man, this stranger, was my father. The man whose memory I had carried with me every day, whose face I had seen in dreams. This was impossible. And yet here I was with my sister in a house that no longer felt like home, listening to the impossible truth that had been kept from me my entire life. The weight of it crushed me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. How could this be? How could everything I had known be built on a lie? I staggered backward, the room spinning around me as my sister's words reverberated in my ears. My father. But how? I had buried that part of myself, the part that ached for a man who had supposedly been lost to me forever. For years, I had learned to cope with the void left by his absence, the unanswered questions and the longing for answers that never came. The thought of him had been buried deep, a wound too painful to revisit. Yet here I was, facing a stranger who was supposed to be the man who had once shared a life with my mother, a life that, until that very moment, had felt entirely out of reach. I wanted to scream, to lash out at Kara for withholding this truth, for keeping this unimaginable secret locked away. But I couldn't find my voice. Kara, you're lying. You have to be lying. This doesn't make any sense. My words came out in a choked sob, desperation curling around every syllable. The air felt thick, suffocating as I looked at the man who claimed to be my father. Vincent's expression never wavered. He didn't flinch, didn't try to explain himself. He just sat there, his gaze steady, as if he had always known this moment would come. I felt my world tilting once more, like everything I had ever thought to be true was unraveling at the seams. My mother, my beautiful, loving mother, had kept this man from me, kept him from us. And why? What could possibly be so important that it had to be hidden for all these years? As if sensing my spiraling thoughts, Kara reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it on my arm. "It wasn't what you think," she said softly, her voice fragile, like it might shatter if she spoke any louder. "Mom didn't keep him from you to hurt you. She kept him from you to protect you from us." The words hung in the air, and I could feel the chill of them seeping into my skin. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the answer, but it was impossible to stop myself from asking. My heart was racing, and I was starting to feel a sense of betrayal, as though the very foundation of my life had been built on lies. Vincent, who had been silent until now, finally spoke again. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Your mother and I," he paused as though choosing his words carefully, "we weren't just in love. We were in danger, and so were you." I stared at him, my mind whirling as I tried to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. "What does that even mean?" I whispered, my body trembling. "What danger?" His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, there was something hauntingly familiar in his gaze, something I couldn't place. The way he looked at me, it was as if he saw right through me, as though he had always known me. "It's not what you think," he repeated, his tone insistent. "Your mother didn't want you to know the truth about what we were involved in, because if you did, you would have been a target too." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. But the unease, the lingering fear in his words told me this was no ordinary family secret. It wasn't just about a forbidden love, not just about a relationship that had to be kept hidden. No, there was something deeper at play, something far more sinister. And for the first time in my life, I found myself wondering, was I still a stranger to this man who claimed to be my father? Or had I, in some way, always known him, even if my memory refused to admit it? The confusion, the sense of betrayal, it was overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in a world that had been crafted just for me, one that I hadn't even known existed. The line between family and lover, between truth and deception, was blurring before my eyes, and I had no idea who to trust anymore. The tension in the room was unbearable, suffocating, and I could feel my chest tightening with every word that came out of Vincent's mouth. I had never felt more lost. My hands shook as I tried to process everything, as though my mind were struggling to catch up to the chaos that had erupted around me. "What danger?" I repeated, almost pleading, my voice now cracking under the strain of the unknown. Vincent stood slowly, the weight of his silence as heavy as the words that had already been spoken. There was something in his eyes, something too dark to ignore, that held me in place. "You're not ready for the full truth," he said softly, but with a finality that made my skin crawl. "But you need to understand one thing. It's not just about your mother and me. It's about you too." My heart pounded harder, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. "What are you saying?" I whispered, fear seeping into my voice. "What do you mean it's about me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted to Kara, and I saw a flash of something pass between them. An understanding, a shared burden, as though they both knew what was coming next and neither of them could stop it. Kara's face had gone pale, and her hands trembled as she wiped away the tears that had begun to fall, but she said nothing. It was as if she, too, was waiting for Vincent to reveal the truth, the one final piece that would shatter whatever was left of the fragile world we had once known. "Your mother and I," Vincent began again, his voice now more grave, more urgent. "We weren't just running from the past. We were protecting you from something, someone. There are people who would stop at nothing to keep you from learning the truth. And it's not just about me. It's about who you are, who you've always been." His words hung heavy in the air, and I felt a wave of panic rise within me, choking my throat. "Who I am? What do you mean? What's wrong with me?" I demanded, the fear in my voice giving way to frustration. This was too much for one night, for one conversation. I wanted to run, to scream, to lash out at them both for tearing apart my life in a matter of minutes. But then Vincent did something I hadn't expected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. It was old, the edges frayed, the paper yellowed with time. "This is for you," he said, handing it to me. I hesitated before taking it, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably familiar, my mother's. My heart skipped a beat as I read her words, the weight of them crashing down on me like a tidal wave. "If you're reading this," the letter began, "then I'm no longer able to protect you. The world you thought you knew is a lie. Your father, Vincent, was never the man you thought he was, but neither was I. You have the strength to understand, to survive what's coming. I'm sorry, and I hope you find the truth before it's too late." The words seemed to blur together, the room spinning as the letter slipped from my fingers. "No," I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. "No, this can't be real. My mother wouldn't have." But as the reality of what I had just read began to sink in, I felt something snap inside of me. For the first time in my life, I realized that my mother, my protector, my guide, the woman who had always been my foundation, had been hiding something far more dangerous than I could have imagined. Vincent's presence, his claim on me, had never been about the love they had shared. It had always been about something darker, something deadly that had been lurking beneath the surface. And now, it seemed, the truth was catching up to me faster than I could run. I turned to Kara, desperation in my eyes. "What is this? What is all of this?" But she couldn't meet my gaze. Her silence spoke volumes, and in that silence I understood the terrible weight of everything she had kept from me. There was no escape from this, no way to turn back. The world I had known, the family I had once trusted, was crumbling around me, and the path ahead was filled with nothing but shadows and uncertainty. And in the midst of it all, the one question remained. Who could I trust now? Vincent? Kara? Or was I the one who had been kept in the dark for so long that I had no idea what the truth even looked like anymore? I took a step back, my breath shallow, my mind spinning faster than I could process. The walls of my own house felt like they were closing in on me, pressing down, suffocating me with secrets I was never meant to uncover. My hands gripped the back of the chair beside me, as though it was the only thing keeping me grounded, but the ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. I needed answers. No, I needed the answer. Why had my mother kept me in the dark for so long? Why had she allowed me to live this lie, only to drop this bombshell on me when it was too late? It felt like the world I had built for myself, my identity, my history, my family, was made of glass, and it was shattering with every new word that left Vincent's mouth. And then, just as I thought the storm had passed, just as I thought I might finally be able to piece things together, Vincent dropped the next bombshell. "You're not just her daughter," he said, his voice cold, measured, but with an edge that sent a chill through me. "You're mine, too." My heart stuttered. I wanted to scream at him to stop, to deny him, to tell him he was lying. But his eyes, those eyes, bore into me with such a fierce intensity that I felt the words die in my throat. "No," I whispered, shaking my head as if somehow doing so could make the truth vanish. "No, I'm not. I'm not your daughter. This is." But Vincent cut me off, his voice a low growl that vibrated in my chest, quiet but powerful. "The blood runs in your veins. You've always known there was something different about you. That's because you're more than just your mother's child. You've inherited more than just her love and her strength. You're part of something bigger, something much more dangerous." The weight of his words hung in the air like a physical force pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I couldn't think straight. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't even realized had been gathering in my eyes. "What do you mean?" I managed to choke out. "What are you saying? What danger am I in?" The room seemed to darken, and for a moment I felt like I was suffocating. The air was too thick, too heavy. Vincent's presence loomed larger than ever, his words sinking deep into my consciousness like poison. "You were never meant to find out," he said quietly, his voice full of regret. "Your mother did everything she could to protect you, but now that you know, now that the truth is out, there's no turning back." I could barely hold myself together. My mind screamed, "This is impossible. This isn't my life. It can't be my life." But it was. It was my reality, and there was no denying it anymore. In a flash, it all came rushing back. The strange connections I had felt growing up, the inexplicable sense of being different from everyone else. My mother's cryptic warnings about trust, about the importance of staying in the shadows. All the fragmented memories I had brushed off as my imagination running wild. I had always felt like I didn't quite belong. But now, in the wake of this revelation, I could see it clearly. I wasn't just the daughter of a woman who had once been in love with a man I didn't know. I was a part of something much more tangled, more complicated than that. A legacy that came with consequences I couldn't yet fully comprehend. Kara's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts, soft but strained. "You don't know everything, please," she pleaded. "You can't understand it all right now, but you need to trust us. This wasn't just about love. It was about survival." Her eyes, filled with guilt and desperation, met mine. "We didn't want to drag you into this, into the world that followed your mother's choices. But now it's too late. You've seen the truth." The air was thick with sorrow, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on all of us. I wanted to scream at them both, at Vincent, at Kara, for lying to me, for keeping me in the dark. But what could I say? What could I do now? The man I had never known was my father, the family I thought I knew was built on deception, and my world was coming apart at the seams. and all I could do was stand there, paralyzed as the storm of secrets and lies continued to rage around me, knowing that my life would never be the same again. In that moment, as Vincent and Kara stood before me, the reality of it all hit me like a wrecking ball. It wasn't just about forbidden love. It wasn't about the kind of family I had imagined, the one where my mother had been the sole constant, the one who had protected me from the world. It was about something darker, something that had always been there, beneath the surface, waiting for the right time to emerge. And now, as everything I had ever known crumbled before me, I was left with one question that haunted me more than anything else. What am I supposed to do now? The question echoed in my mind, a cruel refrain that seemed to reverberate through the walls of the room. What now? I couldn't even begin to answer it. The floor beneath my feet felt unsteady, as though the very ground was buckling beneath the weight of this truth. Everything I had ever believed was being stripped away, layer by layer, until nothing was left but this raw, jagged reality. My mother, my family, my identity, all of it had been a carefully constructed illusion. I wasn't just someone with a past I didn't fully understand. I was the product of a forbidden love, forbidden not just because of the societal boundaries it defied, but because the very forces that shaped it had been wrapped in secrecy and lies. Vincent wasn't just my father. He was a shadow that had haunted my mother's life, and now he was standing before me, demanding that I accept a truth that felt like a betrayal. I felt a hand on my shoulder, Kara's hand. Her touch was gentle, but there was something desperate in it, something that told me she was trying to keep me from spiraling any further. "You don't have to make any decisions right now," she said softly, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "You don't have to understand it all, just know that we're in this together." But how could she say that? How could she possibly expect me to believe that after everything I had just learned? How could she expect me to trust her after she had been part of the lie that had kept me in the dark for so long? The betrayal was suffocating, and yet there was a part of me, something deep inside, that knew she had been bound by the same chains, the same secrets as I had. And maybe, just maybe, she was as lost as I was. Vincent stepped closer, and I felt the air around me grow colder, heavier. His presence was overwhelming, impossible to ignore. "The world you thought you knew is gone," he said, his voice low but steady. "And now you have to decide whether you'll be a part of the legacy that comes with it." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine, and I could see the weight of his words hanging between us. "You're not just anyone. You're a part of something that's much bigger than what your mother could protect you from. You've always had it in you, and now it's time to embrace it." His words were like a slow burn, sinking deep into my skin. What did he mean? What was I supposed to embrace? A legacy of lies, a world built on secrecy. Everything inside of me screamed to run, to walk away and leave all of this behind. But somehow I knew there was no walking away. The past, the truth, whatever it was tangled in me now, and I couldn't escape it. No matter how hard I tried, I was already a part of it. I turned to Kara, her face a mask of uncertainty. "Tell me, Kara," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I struggled to hold myself together. "How long did you know? How long did you know about him, about all of this?" She met my gaze, her eyes filled with unshed tears, her lips trembling. "I knew," she said, her voice breaking, "but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't break your heart like that. You had to have your own truth, your own path to understanding. I didn't want to be the one to destroy the person you thought you were." Her words tore at me, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. How could I? How could I offer forgiveness when my world had been shattered by the truth she had kept from me? There was no more time for questions, no more time for answers. The finality of it all settled on me like a heavy weight, a crushing burden I wasn't sure I was strong enough to carry. Everything I had ever known, everything I had ever loved, had been a lie. And in that moment, I realized the truth was far worse than I had ever imagined. Not only was my family built on secrets, but I was a part of something that could never be untangled. A part of a love that had been so powerful, so forbidden, that it had carved a dark path through all our lives. And now, the question no longer mattered. I didn't need to know what I was supposed to do next, because, deep down, I understood something far more terrifying. The truth was already in me. And no matter how much I wanted to reject it, no matter how hard I tried to run from it, there was no turning back. I was already part of this twisted legacy, and it would define me for better or for worse for the rest of my life.